You've built your business over decades, and now it's time to think about that once in a lifetime exit. You've come to the right place. Here, you will hear business exit professionals talk about what you should know before exit. Hi, I'm Armando Roman, family CFO at AXIOM Founders Family Office, a wealth management firm in Scottsdale for founders' families. Here at AXIOM, we know you want to be financially confident and secure. And the problem is, there's so much noise and just plain bad information out there to make informed choices for your family, especially when you own a valuable business. And that can make you feel confused and frustrated, which is why the FBI asked me to train 400 FBI special agents, all of them CPAs, to train them in their own personal financial planning. So call my office today to schedule your 30-minute founder strategy call at 480-367-9000. There's no cost, no obligation. You have nothing to lose. Enjoy this episode of the Founders Guidepost.
Hi, I'm Catherine Anaya, journalist and host of Horizonte on Arizona PBS, and I am your guest host for the Founders Guidepost Podcast today. And my guest is none other than Armando Roman, CEO and founder of AXIOM Founders Family Office and host of the Founders Guidepost Podcast. Armando, how are you? It's great to see you.
I'm doing great, Catherine. How are you doing?
Doing well, and thank you so much for having me as your guest host.
Thank you.
I'm looking forward to chatting, but before we do get started, I want to tell our audience a little bit about you in case they don't know. With 32 years as a licensed CPA, Armando has dedicated his career to helping families navigate the complexities of personal finance, wealth management, and business transitions. He is a true family man, married for 32 years, and the proud father of 3 adult children, including a daughter graduating from Yale College this year. Congratulations, Armando. That's exciting.
Thank you.
Armando has lived in Scottsdale for 25 years, and his Arizona roots run deep. His grandmother was born in Arizona in 1911, when Arizona was still a territory. As an entrepreneur, Armando has built and exited 2 businesses, a CPA firm serving closely held businesses, and a niche management consulting firm. He founded the Scottsdale Founders Forum, Arizona's premier pre-exit event for founders, and the Founders Guidepost Podcast. This podcast dedicated to business exit and succession planning. He's a sought-after speaker and presenter. In fact, he was invited by the FBI to train 400 FBI special agents, all of whom were CPAs, to train them on their own personal financial planning. Armando has helped oversee a $1.5 billion institutional investment portfolio for a major charitable organization. And as an appointee of 2 bishops of the Roman Catholic Diocese of Phoenix, he was responsible for prudent investment management and oversight of the diocese's investment portfolio. He helped lead the CPA profession in Arizona and nationally, serving as chairman of the Arizona Society of CPAs and serving on the governing body of the nation's largest CPA association, the American Institute of CPAs. For founders seeking an experienced, trusted advisor who understands both the financial and personal aspects of wealth and business transitions, Armando Roman offers an unmatched combination of expertise, integrity, and a deep commitment to family legacy. Congratulations on all your success, Armando.
Thank you, Catherine. Thank you so much.
When do you sleep?
Now that the kids are out of the house, I sleep more.
Very nice. Very nice. Well, let's dive in. First of all, give me the big picture, if you will, of AXIOM Founders Family Office. First off, what is a family office?
So a family office is not a new concept, but it's reserved typically for the mega wealthy, the super rich. And if you think about families like the Bezos family, the Amazon founder, of course, he probably has homes all over the world, real estate all over the world, his primary business and all these other companies and that. And he needs a team of people just to manage his own personal stuff. So he's got maybe 5 or 10 people or more who work for him full time, just overseeing all of his things. And that's bringing together the tax, the legal, the accounting, the insurance, the banking, the investments, all of that under the watchful eye of a team. And so a family office, that's what happens in a family office, where the super rich have had this, for generations and generations, and you've got to have maybe 500 million or more of overall net worth to do that. But we've brought that to the audience that doesn't have that kind of money, but still has those same needs. And so the family office concept, not new, but very, very impactful for the super rich, the mega wealthy families in this world.
Well, it's overwhelming when you think about all of the aspects that go into this. So you coordinate and oversee all the professional services for them, correct?
Right, exactly. Exactly. So what we're doing is coordinating, overseeing everything for them, making sure that the tax and legal are communicating. Having been a licensed CPA, having had my own practice as a CPA firm for years, that's when it became very apparent that the lawyers and tax people, they don't always talk. And the one who pays the price is the client, because the attorneys will sometimes do things that make perfect sense from an asset protection standpoint, but it triggers a tax. And had they communicated with the tax CPA before they did it, there might have been a better resolution to get to the same place without triggering that tax component. So yes, making sure that we can manage and oversee that entire team makes it much more fluid and brings it all under one overarching strategy for the benefit of that family.
So what you're saying then is that what the super wealthy do to protect themselves and preserve and grow their wealth, other people can do that as well.
Right. They certainly can. And there are lots of strategies out there, Catherine, that people just aren't aware of. And think about it like this. We hear about the big names in the news all the time. The CEO of Ford or the CEO of, XYZ company got an enormous bonus and a pension and that. Well, that's making use of federal law. That federal law applies just as much to the CEO of Ford as it applies to that one-man shop here in Scottsdale. So making use of that same federal law can be extremely beneficial for that business owner and for that family.
So talk to me a little bit about who you serve. Who is that ideal founder, entrepreneur, or business owner?
So that ideal founder, business owner is typically first generation wealth. They came from very humble beginnings, and through their own blood, sweat, and tears have built wealth for themselves and for their family. They are typically people of faith. They feel blessed, and we often hear that they are tithing. They feel that they got to give away, say, 10% of their wealth to either their church or to charity or so. We hear them also feeling obligated that they've got to not just take care of their own family, but of the broader community. So it's fun to work with them because they're being very generous in the community, supporting the Little League and supporting this and that. And sometimes when they really knock it out of the park, maybe they build that whole new wing at the hospital because they can, So it's fun to participate in that. They're typically also very health conscious, and they're aware that their longevity is really tied to the actions they take. Am I eating right? Am I sleeping? Am I stressed? Do I need to get to Mayo for the annual checkup like I'm supposed to? Well, probably so. And they're very much family people. The family is extremely, extremely important to them. And they go to extremes really sometimes to take care of the family. They've built a business, Catherine, from some expertise that they have. And that expertise can be in any number of things. Sometimes they've gone to college, sometimes they haven't, but whatever their business is that they have, they are truly the expert in that space. And that's how they have made that company even better and bigger and more profitable. And that's where the family wealth is now coming from, because they've built that business. We often seem to meet them when they've hit a couple of thresholds. When they've just gone over that $1 million a year mark in profit a year, because I think what seems to happen is they've been trying to get there for so long that once they actually get there, they realize the world is different and that they want to preserve what they've built. So now it matters to maybe go check in with the lawyer and get a whole plan together in place with the wealth manager and the tax CPA, get those all working together so that what they've put together stays there for them going forward. And then we also meet them, Catherine, when they've begun to think about selling that business, or they are actually in taking steps now to sell the business, or they have just sold the business and they want to make sure they preserve everything that they've built up to that point, and that it doesn't get lost through litigation or something else.
So it sounds like they have a lot more to think about. You said founders, entrepreneurs, and business owners. Why them specifically? Why focus on them?
We focus on them, I could probably say for very selfish reasons. And I'll tell you why I say that, because I have to go back to how my family got here. My grandmother was born here in 1911 in Arizona when it was a territory. The next year became a state, but she was the first to arrive here from Mexico. She met my grandfather, who was born in Mexico, and he came here when he was 15. But that's relevant because when he got here in 1915, that was during the Mexican Revolution. Between 1910 and 1920, the Mexican Revolution, it's estimated that about 1 million people were killed during that conflict. So it was just a horrible time during that time, of course. At that time, when the revolution got to the small village where my family was from, my grandfather's family was from, my grandfather, who was 15 at that time, he saw his brother killed, he saw his father killed. And when that happened, a family friend grabbed my grandfather and brought him to the United States so that he could live. And so that's how he got here in 1915. So he and my grandmother met, children, of course, followed. When my parents grew up, they both grew up as migrant farm workers. And I say that because that's still a very viable business today here, agriculture in the United States. But as migrant farm workers, education often takes a backseat. You're following the crops. So my parents grew up that way, didn't finish high school, got married. My father got into construction. And then when he got into construction, he began doing concrete. He became really skilled at finishing concrete. And so when I was about 8, he started his own concrete finishing company. And that was a big deal. Now he had his own business. He could do beautiful concrete, but he'd never run a business before. And it was a struggle. Like many people go through that struggle when they start a company because they just don't know how to run a business. Well, anyhow, fast forward a few more years, I was 8 when he started the company, but it's pertinent to add at this point, I have 2 older brothers and 1 younger. So my older brothers are 5 years older than me, and then the other one is a year older, so he's 6 years older than me. So when I was about 11, I saw my oldest brother drop out of high school to marry his pregnant girlfriend. And I thought, that just looks like a bad idea. A year later, Catherine, my second older brother dropped out of high school to marry his pregnant girlfriend. And I thought, that is not going to happen to me. I'm not going to let that happen. I'm doing something different. I'm going to go to college. I don't know what I'm going to study, but for me, it was a defining moment where it was very clear that was not the path that I wanted for me. So a few years later, I was about 15, and my dad was at the dinner table talking about some issue with his business, something was going on. And I didn't know what it was, but it was pretty apparent that he didn't really understand it. And my dad was very smart, but he had to talk with an attorney about something. Since then, I've come to realize that lawyers often speak in lawyer language. And sometimes we have to try to keep up with them because they forget that we're not all lawyers too. So I think what it was is my dad just didn't really follow along with the attorney. He's probably talking in lawyer speak, and he didn't know what to do. And it was at that point for me, when I was 15, that I realized that's how I could help my family. I could study business in college. And by studying business, then I could be helpful to my dad, my brothers, and people who are like them, who are trying to improve their family, but they just don't know the workings of a business. So I decided at 15, I was going to study business. I did a little homework and looked like I had to study accounting because accounting seemed like it was the core of business. I didn't know what either of these things was at the time. And I realized, well, I have to become a certified public accountant because that means I'm a professional in that space. I didn't know what a CPA was either, but I was going to be that. So I went to college to study accounting, became a CPA, and about age 30, opened up my own CPA firm so that I could help people just like my dad and just like my brothers. And so those are the founders, the entrepreneurs, and the business owners. And then as I was practicing in the CPA world, I realized that there are a lot of great tax practitioners out there, and I could be even more useful for these founders and entrepreneurs and business owners if I were more of the team coordinator for them, overseeing the tax, legal, accounting, financial, banking, insurance, investments, all that stuff for them. And so that's what we do as the wealth manager, as the family CFO for that family.
There are so many aspects of your story I know a lot of us can relate to. And it goes back to what you said. You don't know what you don't know.
Right.
And we could all use a team coordinator at some point. So what are some of the common issues that you see and help solve when a new client comes on board with AXIOM?
So what we often see is they've got some glaring gaps in what they have set up. So they may have set up the right entity for the business. They may have gotten a pretty decent insurance policy on the house. But what we see in these glaring gaps sometimes are that they don't have estate documents set up that talk about the contingencies that will happen. They don't have an exit plan for their business. They don't have a succession plan for the business. And think about this, Catherine. If you think about most business owners have 90% or more of the family's net worth in that one business. You know, it's a big chunk of the family wealth. And if there's no succession plan in the company and that business owner suddenly passes away, where does that leave the family? It's very easy for that company value to go to zero if nobody is right there to step in and do the right things to keep that value intact for the benefit of the family. So some of the gaps that we see, some of the issues that we address, they haven't addressed that succession plan. So to help us do a better job in looking at everything for them, we have checklists for everything. So we go through the estate planning checklist, the tax checklists, and we want to make sure that all those things that need to be there, so they have one overarching strategy to take care of this family that happens to own a very valuable company, that it is in coordination with all of their service providers. And I'll mention just a couple of things really quickly as well, because I've heard this over and over again. I spoke with a business owner just a few years ago who had sold his company just a few years before. And he'd built a great company and it was worth a lot. When it was all said and done, he sold it to some big name company that we would all recognize. And so when it was done, he got a wire into his checking account. I don't know, maybe it was $30 million. It was a big chunk of money. And he told me that for 2 years, he didn't touch the money.
Wow.
He said, are you wondering if you've missed anything in your financial planning? We hear that a lot from very smart, very successful people. Stop wondering. Offload that responsibility to professionals who do this for a living. Start by scheduling your founder's strategy call at AXIOMcorp.com. Didn't know what to do, Armando. All of a sudden, I had this pile of cash in the bank. I didn't know what to do. So I didn't do anything. I just left it there. He was so nervous and so scared. And that makes perfect sense when you describe it. The good thing was he did nothing. That way he didn't just waste it. But a point I want to make is when he had his company, he still had that $30 million valuable asset, but he didn't see it that way. He saw it as his company that he ran. He was in total control, and that was great. Once that turned into cash, it was a very different picture for him. And from my perspective as a family CFO, as a wealth manager, to me, it's the same $20 million value or $30 million value. It's the same thing. It's just in a different asset. So we have to do all those same things to protect that money when it's in the company, as we would do when we look at that in an investment account for 30 mil. Is it titled correctly? Are the assets really allocated correctly? Are they diversified? Are there checks and balances on the money managers? Are there all these things in place to protect that investment account? Well, let's do the equivalent on the business side so that we can help to preserve the value there as well.
All excellent items to keep in mind. As I mentioned earlier, you do host an event, the Scottsdale Founders Forum. So that protection and that preparedness, is that what drove you to start that event?
We started the event from a very specific thing. And I'll just give you the quick story on that. We got a phone call from a CPA, a good referral source. He says, Armando, we've got a client. They're really busy, got about 25 employees. They need a 401k. Can you take care of them? Yes, of course, absolutely. We don't typically do one-offs like that. We want the entire relationship. We want to really work with that family, but good referral source, good company. The couple came in here to talk with me. I met with them. It was a husband and wife that ran this company. And I asked them a number of questions to help us understand what they really needed and what was the purpose behind getting the 401k. Why did they want this? And they wanted it to take care of the employees. They wanted to share some of the profits with the employees. They were good people, good business owners. They really were generous with their employees as well. And they wanted this as a vehicle to help share some of that profit with the employees. Great. So that was pretty clear. But as I'm talking with the husband, who was 20 years older than the wife, and I think it was a second marriage for both of them, if I remember correctly. But anyhow, as they were here and I was talking with them, I said to him, to me, the next obvious question, you've had this company 25 years, you're in your early 60s. To me, the obvious question is, when are you going to sell this business?
Mm-hmm.
And he says, I don't want to talk about that. I said, I hear you. You're also asking me to design a 401k plan for you. And I have to understand what your plans are so we can really do this to the best of our ability. He says, I understand, but I don't want to talk about that right now. So we didn't talk about it. We built in protections as we always do in 401ks. About a year later, Catherine, he was under contract to sell his business. So looking back, I believe what was probably really happening, he was probably already in conversations with people, but maybe he and his wife hadn't quite had that conversation yet. So maybe that's why he didn't want to talk about it with, the three of us here in this meeting.
Right.
And he had started the company years later than she joined the company. So, and anyhow, though, he was now under contract to sell. So knowing that they were a very generous couple with their employees and to their community, I called the CPA, and by now it's about early November of that particular year. I called the CPA and I said, hey, our client here who's going through this significant sale, they're going to have the biggest tax hit ever in their life. And I know they're very generous people. Have you had the chance to talk with them about charitable giving and how it can reduce the tax bill this year when they're going to have this big sale? And he said, no, Armando, I'm going to wait till it closes. They're too busy right now with everything. They can't talk right now. After it closes, then we'll talk about that. Well, Catherine, that sale closed on December 30th. The next day was New Year's Eve, which is a half day at best for everybody. So on a very significant multi-million-dollar sale of this business, the tax planning that could have been done, that could have saved them millions of dollars in taxes, didn't happen. And I said to myself, never again.
Right.
Never again is one of our clients not going to have the right tax planning. Never again is anybody who will listen to me going to have that happen to them. Because think about this. This was a very generous couple. Let's say that after the sale, they had $5 million more in their bank account. How much of that extra money would have gone into our local community to support the baseball league, the volleyball league, their church, their synagogue, the United Way. A lot of that would have gone back into our community, but instead it got taxed and it went away and it won't come back.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the impetus of starting the Scottsdale Founders Forum, so that we could bring together people who are business exit professionals and handpick and invite people who own local businesses here, invite them in to talk about exit. So at that, we have a live panel, a discussion. We have a merger and acquisition attorney. That's the attorney who buys and sells companies for a living. We have an investment banker. That's the guy who takes that business and packages it up and creates this whole auction process across the country and even internationally to say, hey, I've got this company, who wants to buy it? And they run a whole process to help that owner, that seller, get top dollar and get the best deal. We have a tax CPA, we have estate lawyers, myself, the family CFO, and the whole idea is the people who have come to our event, that they learn about exit. And I cannot tell you, Catherine, how many people after our event, we've done it now for 4 years, but how many people after our event have come up to me and said, Armando, thank you so much. I learned so much. I had no idea that's how this works.
Oh, I know it because I was very happy to MC your Scottsdale Founders Forum event last fall. I found it so informative, and so many of the folks that you had there and the stories that you shared, similar to what you just did, left an impression on people, a lot of people. So in addition to the group of founders in the room, we also heard from a police officer who served as your keynote speaker. You had a one-on-one conversation with him in front of the audience, which was awesome. Everyone really loved hearing his story and how he started his business, grew it, and then sold it. Everyone in the room really seemed so focused on his story. Is this what folks can expect at the Scottsdale Founder Forum events, to really relate to people who are actually out in the community doing what you talk about?
Yes, absolutely. And we survey people after they come to our event, and we've had over 150 founders come to our events over the past 4 years. It's quite a bit. Most of those, almost all of them, are here local in Arizona. They operate in other states as well, but they're here, local businesses based here. And the thing they tell me they like the most, Catherine, is that one-to-one conversation. Because the person up there who I'm having that one-to-one conversation with, he or she has already gone through exit. And the people in the audience, they are founders who have built great companies, and they see themselves someday also having an exit. And one of the best things I heard from after one of our events was a couple came up to me and said, Armando, we want to be up there on stage in front with you. We want to be the one telling our exit story, because it was just so inspirational to hear what he said he went through. We want to be the ones in that story. So that's our aspiration and our goal.
Well, as I mentioned, you do offer so much invaluable information at these events. What learning points can you share with our audience here on the podcast, but also about the Scottsdale Founders Forum just in general?
So in general, the learning points would be, and we have a white paper on this. So the white paper we give out freely. Like I said, we have had about 150 founders come to our live events. And again, our 4th year doing it. And we've put a one-page white paper together to help summarize the learning points of that event. So the founders who came, we did some rough numbers to understand, of all the people in the audience here, about how much are their companies worth. If we add it all up, what is it worth roughly? We came to about 2.5 billion with
Wow.
a B. And Catherine, these are local Arizona companies. These are not folks on Wall Street. These are local Arizona companies. And some of these are just hitting pay dirt like crazy, and they're based here. People don't even know they're here, but they're great companies. So the learning points from the people who came, we surveyed them and asked them a lot of questions. Number one question they had was, what is my business worth? Because some just don't have any idea. They're in a brand new space. They just don't know. The number two question that the founders had was, okay, how do I increase the value of my company between now and the time I sell? And so because of the founder's number one question, we added a business valuation service this year through a sister company, because as we are sitting here with them in our conference room and having conversations and dialogue, and we build that personal balance sheet for them, we have to have a good sense for the value of that business so that they can then determine when is it time for them to sell.
Mm.
And when we have an idea and we can share with them a very good idea of what the real value is, then we can get a little more concrete in those planning steps that we need. Another one of the learning points I'd say from our Scottsdale Founders Forum events is that the professionals who've been there on the table, the exit professionals, have all pretty much said the same thing. Start planning well in advance. 2 to 5 years before you sell, start planning. And they said, and get your exit team together early.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning, don't wait till you've got a buyer who says, I'll give you $30 million for the company today. Plan ahead and build it out ahead of time. So that exit team is just so critical to the successful outcome. And when I talk, Catherine, about the outcome for the business, it's not always about getting the best price for the company. One of the things that's very gratifying about working with the founders when they go through this whole exercise of exiting the business is they often want to make sure the employees who help them get there, that once the owner sells and goes away, that the employees are still going to be okay. They're going to have a good owner who's going to take care of them and value them and keep that good, stable business the way it needs to be for the benefit of those people and their families. So those are some of the learning points from our Scottsdale Founders Forum events.
Well, you can't emphasize that enough, that it's more than just about dollars. And as I mentioned earlier, you do host this podcast, the Founders Guidepost. Is that along the lines of why you decided to start this podcast? How do you want it to serve your audience?
Yeah, that's a very good question. It's very, very similar, but it's different. So a few things come into play on that. We want to highlight typically local expertise here, meaning here in Arizona, who are the experts people go to or can go to when they have questions. So we recently did, for example, a podcast with an attorney whose specialty is franchises. I'm so grateful that we have her here in Arizona because franchising is very popular. It's a very proven business model typically for someone who's never owned a business before, for them to get into their own business by buying into a franchise. So we make it several goals with our Founders Guidepost podcast. We make it a goal to highlight local expertise, tax CPAs, legal, attorneys, appraisers, but local Arizona resident experts. And I've been in the Valley a long time, and I remember hearing so many times, you can't find good people in Phoenix. You got to go to New York, Boston, Chicago, LA, San Francisco. That just isn't true. Maybe it was 40 years ago. I've been here a long time, like I said. But there's a lot of good expertise here, and we are the 5th largest city in the United States. And a lot of expertise is now here local. So with our podcast, we are trying to let people see them and let people meet them. And it's a little surprising to me. Often I'll talk with business owners who tell me they don't want to call their attorney yet. They're thinking of selling. They don't want to call their lawyer yet because they know that he or she's going to charge them $600 an hour. So,
well, it is something to think about.
It is. It is. I don't mean to downplay that, but if you're selling a company for $30 million, spend $600. Spend $600. But that's another story. But my point is, what I can now do, now that we have these experts in this, we've got 60 episodes now of our podcast. And again, these are local experts. Now what I can do is I can take that podcast link, I can email that out to a client or to whoever I had the conversation with and say, hey, you talked about buying a franchise. take a listen to this local expert franchise attorney. You're going to learn a ton. After you listen to that conversation that I had with her about franchises, then let's set up a phone call and let's talk with her. But listen first so you get to know who she is. You get to hear her expertise for free, and you will be better equipped, better informed, and you can then ask better questions when it comes time to actually meet with her in person.
Yes, so important to hear from people who have actually gone through the process, who can share their knowledge, especially like you mentioned, for free. So you were part of the leadership of the CPA profession in Arizona and at the national level, both as chairman and board of director of the Arizona Society of CPAs and the governing council of the American Institute of CPAs. That is a unique experience. How do founders and their families benefit from that experience?
I learned a lot in that process, and that changed part of how we think and how we serve people. Part of what the learning point from that for me is I met CPAs all across the country during that service to the CPA profession. There's a big shortage of CPAs, and it's only getting worse, not better. And we are getting older. We as a profession, the people in the profession are aging out, but there's not the pipeline of new people coming in. So the shortage of CPAs now, the shortage of tax experts is just getting worse. So what happens in what's the expression when the boots hit the ground, or the rubber meets the road, I think is the expression.
Yes.
But at that point, what that means in reality for the local business owner who needs that tax planning, well, the tax CPAs are so busy doing their tax work, just trying to meet April 15th, March 15th, June 15th, September 15th deadlines and due dates, that there often isn't the time that they would like to have to do the tax planning with that business owner and the family. So we make it a point that for our clients that we get on that CPA's calendar, the tax CPA's calendar, and that we have those conversations. So that was a big learning point. The shortage that we have here as CPAs, it's not just here in Arizona, it's all across the country. It is a national problem. I also learned from that a lot of best practices on how people serve their clients, which has made us better at including their best practices in how we deliver services. But it's also given us access, Catherine, to industry experts, professional industry experts all across the country. So as we have clients who come on board from different states or who move to different states, we've got local people in that area that we can tap into to access their knowledge of that local regional space as well.
That's so important. Armando, there's a national effort led by the CPA profession to help people become more financially literate, and only a handful of people throughout the country have been selected to be on this national committee. You were selected. Congratulations on that, by the way.
Thank you.
Notably, so was Sharon Lechter, who is fabulous and the co-author of the international best-selling book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. She was also appointed by 2 U.S. presidents to a national financial literacy advisory role. That is great company to share this honor with. How does this national financial literacy experience help you and your team serve a business owner and their family?
Well, before I get to that, I will say Sharon Lechter is a superstar. She's amazing. She's a financial guru. So being able to meet her while serving in this National Financial Literacy Commission role was kind of a frosting on the cake for me. So some of the learning points for me and the takeaways from being part of that National Financial Literacy Initiative is that there's some people who are very in tune with numbers. They get numbers, they understand numbers, and for them, numbers are easy. But there's the vast majority of people, Catherine, where numbers, they just don't understand. They don't get numbers. They're not numbers people. Now, we all have to understand numbers to some extent because we have to manage our money, manage our finances, etc. But as I was on that national commission and learned more about this at a national level, it was very, very apparent that we as a country, the United States, we are, many of us, a majority of us, financially illiterate, meaning it's difficult to manage the checkbook. It's difficult to stay on top of the bills. It's difficult to not outspend your money. As a country, you can go all the way to get a PhD in college, which is the top of the food chain for college, right? You can get all the way there and never once have one class on how to manage your money. And yet we all have to do that every day. If I were king, I would put that into our school systems in about fifth grade. In about fifth grade, so people understand, oh, this is money coming in, this is money going out. So being in that financial literacy role really helped me understand this is a big problem. So we have people coming in who are extremely successful, extremely wealthy, extremely highly educated. It doesn't mean that they're good at managing their finances. It just means all those other things I just said. They're successful, wealthy, smart, educated, et cetera. Yes. So we help with some of the most basic financial things like paying the bills to some of the most complex transactions that they will ever encounter, along with their tax attorneys and their other attorneys and their tax CPAs, et cetera. So we really run the whole realm in that managing money finances realm for them, because we realize we cannot assume that somebody knows something. We have to instead assume that they might not and help educate them and bring them along so they can be better equipped to help themselves and their family with their finances.
Boy, I couldn't agree with you more. I was in the fifth grade when we were taught how to balance a checkbook, and they just don't teach any of that in school anymore. Not so much the checkbook, because that's sort of gone by the wayside, but you know what I mean.
No, I do. And fifth grade is such a pivotal point. I wish that we would put that back in the schools. And anyway, well, it isn't there. And
That's another conversation.
It is. You're right.
Well, Armando, I want to move on to another subject because we haven't talked about institutional investing, and I want to do that for a moment. You were appointed by two bishops of the Roman Catholic Diocese of Phoenix to lead the charge for prudent investment management and oversight of the diocese investment portfolio. You were also appointed to do the same for a public charity that has a very sizable investment portfolio of $1.5 billion. Yes, I said billion dollars. So having been in these very important roles with institutions, how does that institutional investment management experience help you serve a founder and their family?
It helps in so many ways, Catherine, just so many ways that it helps. I'll just touch on a few of these ways. People often come in and they might say they want a private foundation. Well, a private foundation is like setting up a whole separate business that has rules and processes, got to follow IRS, all this stuff. So that can be a great tool. But one of the things that I came to learn by being in these roles, helping to manage and oversee the investment portfolios of institutions, is there needs to be an investment policy statement that sets up some parameters. And the parameters might be, we will not invest in anything that is stem cell research or tobacco or alcohol, but set up some parameters, very clear parameters, so that when it comes time to actually take those dollars and invest them, to allocate them into different companies, to invest them, that it's very clear what you can invest in and what you cannot. You know, being part of the Roman Catholic Diocese investment realm there, because it is a religious organization, there's some very specific things that just cannot be involved with. And so having that institutional knowledge and background really helps us to be very clear on what does that investment policy statement need to look like, what are the marching orders, what should we look at, what should we not look at. And so that's one component right there. But another is institutions are viewed as something that will outlive us. We people, we all have an expiration date. That's just how life is. But institutions don't have to have an expiration date. So the way an institution is set up, they have a governing body, and that governing body of people will change over time. They have a mission, they have goals, and they have a certain mantra that they're marching towards without a certain end date in mind. Business owners should have that same view about their company. where they have all those same guardrails in place, because that will help them understand that when that business owner decides to get out to sell the business, that company will continue on without them under the leadership of somebody else. And so institutions are excellent at that. Business owners, not so much. So we help those business owners understand that, and we help them get there. And we've got to make sure that there's a disciplined approach, a time frame, and all those things that need to be there, processes, procedures, all that stuff that needs to be there with an institution needs to be there as well. And the one other point I'll mention as well in the institutions are often very focused on that investment portfolio is there to support an annual budget. So that portfolio is going to have money pulled out on a very regular basis for specific purposes. So there has to be cash flow that is going to come out at a certain time in a certain amount. And individual portfolios, family portfolios, should really be planned the same way, especially when that business is sold off and now the biggest investment is that investment portfolio. How do we set that up? What's the expected cash flow going to be? When is it going to be pulled out? What are the rules on how we can invest? And all of that is so ingrained in the institutional investment part of it, not so much on the family side. So we help them get there. It's been extremely helpful for us.
Well, it sounds like it. And we've spent a lot of time talking about being prepared, but I want to talk about exit, the business exit. People spend years building a business, yet most only exit once. You founded and exited a CPA firm and a management consulting firm. So you've been through it more than once yourself. How does your exit experience help you guide a founder going through his or her first exit?
Well, I know what that's like. And I know that it can be a very soul-searching time of your life, as it was for me. You know, is it time? Am I ready? Am I going to get the right price? What am I going to do afterwards? All those things can be very emotional. So there's the emotional tug. Am I really emotionally ready in here? But then there's the numbers part of it, which is the mental part of it as well. And so it is a very emotional thing. And when you start a company from scratch and you build it up into something, I have 3 adult kids. The company's the 4th child. Mm-hmm. It really is the 4th child. And so when you decide to take that 4th child and give it to somebody else, that's not an easy thing to do.
No, it's not.
That in effect is how that feels. Not that I've given away a child,
but the thought, just thinking about it.
Right. It can be very emotional, very draining. So when I'm talking with business owners, and I'm thinking of a couple who came in not too long ago, where they're both in the business, they're both working 7 days a week, Catherine. They're both great people. And I could see in her, she was just exhausted. And I thought, boy, I know exactly where she is. And husband said, we get done with work. We got to get some food before we go home. So we'll stop at a restaurant or pick up something. And he says, I'll ask her what you want to eat. And she'll say, you know what, whatever. And I said to her, I know what you're saying. You're saying you don't want to make any more decisions. You don't want to have to think anymore. You just want food to magically appear so you can eat. She goes, that's exactly right. If I hadn't gone through that exit myself and been in her shoes and seen that on her face, I wouldn't know. I wouldn't be able to relate. But I can relate because I have been there. And you learn, good and bad, but we learn through our successes and failures. And as I've gone through those exits, I've learned some good things and learned some things that, I would have done differently. Mm-hmm. It could have been a better outcome. So for me, having that exit experience is very important because it helps me really connect with that person who I'm having that conversation with, who owns that business, which is like their other child.
Yes, you become more relatable and experience matters. So let's talk about more specifics. How do you develop and implement financial strategies that align with the family's values and goals?
We have a very extensive intake process. And I'll just walk you through a little part of that because there are lots of ways to get to the same place. I often say that during our client meetings. There are lots of ways to get to the same place. So for us to align values and goals with the overall picture, we have to understand what are their values, what are their goals. And so we have a conversation with them that begins like this. And I'll say something like, Catherine, what's important about money to you? And you'll say security, something like that. And Catherine, what's important about security to you? You'll say, well, it means that I can take care of the ones I love. And Catherine, what is important about taking care of the ones you love to you? Well, it means I'm a good mom. You kind of go through this whole values ladder thing, and we have to do that so we really get to the top of that ladder, where then they're really opening up and telling us what really matters to them. We go from there to a conversation on goals. What goals that will take time and money to achieve do you want to see, and when do you want those to happen? Sometimes people are very clear on goals, sometimes they're not. But once we talk about those two things, we then talk about the people in their lives that matter. And so I'll ask, I'll ask each, it's often a couple sitting at our conference room, and I will ask, husband or wife first, either one. I'll say, okay, husband, of the people in your life, or of who are the relationships, who matters most in your life? Often we hear God, and often we hear each other. And then we hear third, the kids. Mm-hmm. And it's typically in that order. So when we understand that, and we go back and look at those goals, okay, now I get it. Now they're tithing, and that's part of how they are supporting what they want to support in the community. And it make sense to us. So then it helps us then understand what we need to do, what strategies we need to put in place for them. So for example, if they say, I want to take care of the kids, but what does that really mean? Does that mean you want to be there for them, physically, emotionally? Does that mean you want to help them buy a new house? Does that mean you want to set up a trust and give them a paycheck every day for the rest of their life? What does that really mean to you? And then we work on developing strategies to have that impact that they really want to have on their family and on their community. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And, once you go through that conversation and find out what's important to that client, you mentioned previously having a professional network of advisors, a professional experienced team to serve those clients. So how do you go about evaluating and selecting professional advisors? Who makes the cut?
Well, that's a good question. And we have to constantly have conversations and interviews with people who are potential advisors that we can rely on and work with as we need them. There's a thought out there that to be an expert in anything, you have to have at least 10,000 hours in that space to become an expert in that space, which if that's 1,000 a year, that's 10 years of experience to be an expert. We require 20. We want to work with people who have at least 20 years experience in their discipline. And I love meeting new experts in a very small, specific niche. So for example, someone who knows all about non-fungible tokens. I don't even know what that is, but I met somebody who was the expert in that, thought, wow, I'm going to log that, because if I need that, now I know who my go-to person is. Mm-hmm. It's him, because that is the space that he's in. So the people who make the cut are experts in their space. They work in a very narrow space, which might be legal, but it might be only intellectual property legal. And so a very, very narrow space. And we want them because then when we need them to help take care of the family for something that's happening, we know we've got the right people. They know what they're doing. They're going to be more efficient, and we're going to get the best outcome for that family because we have the right people in the right places, and they're part of the team that's required to take care of and address whatever needs to be addressed for that family.
Mm-hmm. Great. Let's talk taxes now for a moment. Taxes, as we know, can take a big bite out of income. How do you help folks with their taxes?
Well, having been in a tax practice that I owned and ran and sold, now that's been almost 20 years ago now, but that gives me a very good solid foundation on how how taxes work. So we work with different tax CPAs and tax attorneys to help a client achieve the goal that we're trying to achieve. And often that is, how do we minimize taxes, income taxes? How do we minimize estate taxes? And so having that foundation ourselves as a firm allows us to help that family more and better because we understand that and we can very clearly communicate with their other tax and legal experts to get to the right outcome. The family, the person who owns that business, is not the tax expert. And yet without us, they have to go to their tax expert. They have to understand enough to make good decisions, informed decisions with that person. And then they hope that it's going to be the best outcome for them. When we're part of the picture, we have that dialogue with that tax expert because we know what the client's trying to achieve. And then once we've come to that conclusion, then we bring in the client to have a conversation about it and make decisions and move forward. So taxes can be significant. People, Catherine, often see their 401k or their IRA and say, great, yeah, I've got $4 million in my 401k. Great. Well, yes, you have $4 million, but every dollar you pulled out is going to be taxed. And right now, today's tax rate, you probably have more like 3 million. Just understand that it says 4 million on it, but it's not all yours. So we need to look at strategies that can help them lessen that tax bite. And when they own a company, there are more strategies available to them than otherwise. So having the ability to understand the business and what they're trying to accomplish, how it's set up, how the pieces all fit together, helps us tremendously have a better outcome for that family and helps that family and that business owner help them reduce that tax bill, often protect assets better, and have fewer liabilities on that as well.
So critical. What about protecting the family net worth, often called asset protection, which, as you've said, the majority of the family net worth may be tied up in one asset, their business. What are some of the thoughts or strategies related to protecting family net worth?
So let me explain family net worth first, or just net worth first, because the terminology can lose people. So for net worth, what you want to think about is, what do you own? Okay, you own a house, you own cars, you own IRA accounts, 401k accounts, you own maybe a second vacation property, you own these other investments. Those are all things that you own. And on a personal balance sheet, that is what you would list because those are all assets and that becomes part of the net worth. But from that, you have to subtract any debts that are owed, like a mortgage or a car loan or any other debt. The net result, the net number, when you subtract the monies owed from the assets that are owned, the net is what's called net worth. So we always build a personal balance sheet so that we can see and we can show the client what that balance sheet looks like. So when we talk about protecting net worth, we first have to know what's on the balance sheet. And it's always this company that is, again, 90% or more of their net worth. Well, okay, if 90% of your net worth is in this one asset called a business, well, we darn well better go and protect that as well. Well, how do you protect it? Well, you protect it by having the right types of business entities, the right types of structure, the right types of insurance, the right types of employment agreements, the right type of leases, the right types of titling on your assets. All of that protects the assets in that business. And we have checklists, again, for all of this stuff. When I think about protecting the overall family net worth, that relates to having the right types of trusts, the right types of business entities, and the right types of insurance on everything. And if you look statistically about bankruptcies in this country, what triggers bankruptcies? Well, healthcare expenses. If you don't have the right health insurance, that could bankrupt the family. And it's easy for people to kind of look right past that and instead say, oh yeah, I've got health insurance. Okay, is it good health insurance? So there's a lot of digging that has to get done so that we can help protect that overall net worth that belongs to that family.
Mm-hmm. You know, you touched a little bit on generational wealth when you were talking about your story. What can you tell us about transferring wealth to the next generation? Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, certainly. There are lots of ways to get there, and often a married couple doesn't quite see that picture the same way. One of the spouses wants to give right now today. Oh, let's help them buy the house. Oh, let's just give them some money. And I'll tell you, I've had enough clients come in who have children who are now in their 60s still getting help from mom and dad.
Wow.
So nobody really wants to make a trust baby out of their kid or make that young adult dependent on mom and dad forever. And yet sometimes that happens. So when we talk about transferring wealth, we have to be very careful that we're thinking about the long picture, that we are helping the children, adult children, but not making them dependent on mom and dad, because nobody wants to spoil their kids. I hear that a lot. You know, mom and dad have made a lot with this company. They've made themselves wealthy and they want to share with the family, but they don't want to spoil the kids. Okay, well, how do you navigate that? Well, we have to be very thoughtful on how we transfer wealth. And one of the best things that people can do that they don't know they can do, they can set up charitable vehicles where they can bring the adult kids and the grandkids into the picture so that the adult kids and grandkids are part of doling out that money to the folks who need it.
And that would be the charitable giving that you touched on briefly earlier as well. So how does that charitable giving come into play, not only with the work you do, but when you just gave that example of including the children, because, and correct me if I'm wrong, do they also get income from that charitable giving?
Not so much income, but the parents, the creator of the wealth, you know, the first generation, whoever created this wealth, now has a lot of capacity to do a lot of things. So one of the things that is often that comes into play with charitable giving is, why don't we look at setting up some kind of a vehicle where you can give ongoing to the charity of your choice? So sometimes people hear about a private foundation and they want to create their own private foundation, which is basically their own charity that they can then dole monies out to whomever they choose. Those have a lot of strings attached. Often a better choice is a donor advised fund, but I'll just touch on the family aspect of it. One thing that people often don't know is that when they're going to sell their company, all the way around, literally, it's better to give a piece of the ownership of their company to the charity before they sell it, because it's better tax-wise for the family, for the seller of that business. The charity gets more money in their pocket to do whatever they want to do with it. And it's just a better outcome all the way around. So there are very specific strategies in charitable giving that can be super impactful. We have a check in our office, Catherine, that's a big oversized check, maybe 4 feet by, I don't know, 2 or 3 feet. It's a big oversized check for $100 million. Our goal is to help business owners, founders navigate this exit and help them to give more money to charity. And our goal is that by a certain date, by May of 2026, that we will have helped them take $100 million and put that to charitable use. That's our goal. And that's dependent on companies here having that kind of value and helping them navigate this successfully for their family's benefit and the benefit of the community.
And being prepared, of course.
Well, exactly. And being prepared always.
Yes. So we've covered a lot in this episode. Is there anything we haven't touched on that you'd like our audience to know?
We have touched on a lot. I'd say that I'd go back to probably the fundamental, the foundation, that as a family CFO, as a wealth advisory firm that is focused on founders, business owners, and entrepreneurs, those are busy people. And when they have a family and young kids, they're even busier people. And as you know, when kids get their own volleyball, baseball, ballet, dance, all those activities, now the family's even busier. So we help that family to navigate the complexities of legal, tax, insurance, banking, investments, financial planning, all of that, and they can offload that to us. And then they don't have to worry as much or spend as much time with any of that. So as their overall wealth strategist, as their family CFO, we're helping those people to really protect the blood, sweat, and tears that they've expended to build this company and to create this wealth.
Well, as always, I learned so much when you and I chat, Armando. So thank you for that. That's going to do it for this episode of the Founders Guidepost. And Armando, thank you for this conversation, for the work that you do to help founders, entrepreneurs, and business owners and their families. The American dream, as you like to say, is alive and well. So it's only appropriate that we end this episode with your tagline, helping to preserve your American success story. Thanks, Armando.
Thank you, Catherine. Hope you enjoyed this episode of the Founders Guidepost. When you think about exiting your business, that's often a once-in-a-lifetime event with no do-overs, and the stakes can be very high for your family. Before making that leap, ask for your free copy of our Scottsdale Founders Forum white paper, packed full with information that first-time sellers should know before exit. And schedule your 30-minute Founders Strategy Call at AXIOMcorp.com. Your exit can be amazing, everything you dreamed of, when you plan ahead and take all the appropriate and necessary steps. That's what's possible. Until next time, I'm your host, Armando Roman.